небесех, да светится имя Твое, да приидет царствие Твое, да будет воля Твоя, как на небесе и на земле. Хлеб наш насущный дашь к нам днесь.
The Russian-Ukraine war, I did not think I would ever make any video about until this very moment. Now, at this very moment in time, the Ukrainian Armed Forces have breached a sector of Russia called Kursk, and around there is a city called Belgorod, and that is a city my grandmother lives in, and she has had to evacuate because of the invasion. I have always knew that there was issues on both sides of civilians being caught in crossfire, but I never thought it would get to a point where my old grandmother has to leave her city because the Ukrainian Armed Forces have invaded so far deep into Russia. In my family tree, I have both sides that are part Ukrainian, part Russian. So really, my family line is torn between the two. We have relatives on both sides, and that goes for a lot of Ukrainian or Russian families. My grandma would describe exactly these specific drone attacks that would happen all the time on civilians in Russia. There is no bias at all, in my opinion. There's no bias whatsoever, as I have relatives and family both on the Ukrainian side living in Ukraine and relatives who have evacuated their Ukrainian homes because of the war. I also have relatives on the Russian side who, again, also have had to recently evacuate. On the last few days of her staying there inside of her apartment, she described a drone, a Ukrainian drone by the name of Baba Yaga, which translates to the boogeyman, which if you've seen John Wick, you already know that the Russian mobster says that exact line, the Baba Yaga. Now, it really exists. My grandmother, who has never seen John Wick, I guarantee you, she has never seen a single John Wick movie, called this thing, this drone, a Baba Yaga, meaning it is a seriously terrifying, deadly drone. It's different than the others.
He once was an associate of ours. We called him Baba Yaga.
The boogeyman?
Well, John wasn't exactly the boogeyman. He was the one you sent to kill the fucking boogeyman.
But even the days leading up to the special Ukrainian military operation, she had described exactly drones that would be targeting anyone. Even my cousin Sergei, his car was blown up by a Ukrainian drone. His wife was almost blown up because of a Ukrainian drone. Now, what makes the Baba Yaga different than the other drones is it's not just a regular suicide drone. This thing launches rockets. It is in the sky. It's like a UAV, essentially, the way she described it. Something that can stay in the sky, do reconnaissance, and fire missiles deliberately on specific targets. Several weeks upcoming to the special Ukrainian military operation on Kursk, my grandmother would be describing specific drone attacks and drone reconnaissance, where there would be tons of drones constantly buzzing around, flying around, targeting anyone and anything in sight. Now, and I will say in a quick sense, I do have an uncle who was in Ukraine and had to leave to Sweden. I have another cousin. She was also staying in Ukraine for quite a while with her husband for a very long time, and until the rockets and attacks got so bad where they were forced to leave, as it became far too dangerous for them to stay in Ukraine. So there are truly awful things happening on both sides. So I just wanted to break it down here in this video and really show what is going on and exactly how most recently, the invasion of Kursk had my grandmother, who lives in Belgorod, she had to leave for safety in order to avoid having her home hit by any drones or artillery attacks. Another astonishing part about this whole operation is that old people, such as my grandmother and her sister, had to pay about 35,000 Russian rubles, which equates to a bit over $500 Canadian. Now you would think that someone who is an elderly person, an elderly grandmother, would at least have a free ride out of the city where she can get out, be evacuated for free. But guess what? In some countries, it just does not work that way. In some countries, the civilians are left to their own. Me and my mother were able to put together a few $100s each in order to pay for her evacuation extraction fee outside of the city of Belgorod. Now, I did forget to mention that the coming months before the special operation from the Ukrainians, my mother told me about how Belgorod in general was already being so fortified. Soldiers were already putting sandbags across bus stops. Fortifications were being built on every corner of the city slowly because they were preparing and getting ready for this operation. They knew something was going to happen, but they did not expect it to be this big. My grandmother told me about the different kinds of forces of soldiers that were around Belgorod and the Kursk region, from Chechen soldiers, BMC Wagner soldiers, contractors, all sorts of soldiers were set around Kursk and Belgorod. Also, I even have one video of a Russian military helicopter flying over my grandmother's apartment in Belgorod. In about the span of 3 days, they have accomplished taking 74 settlements and cutting off important roadblocks and pathways in order to cut off the Russian military from being able to resupply their men at the front. To continue an operation like this, it takes some serious supply lines. So the fact that they pushed this far forward and they're still pushing is truly insane, and we need to see how far this actually pans out. Because you must remember, in order to keep soldiers fighting, you have to keep them resupplied. If the Ukrainian army does not have supplies coming in with a proper supply route and proper pathways and roads of trucks coming in with constant ammunition and food, bandages, medical supplies, pulling out injured, pulling in fresh soldiers, if they don't have a proper route of manpower supply and weaponry and resources, they will not be able to pull off this operation for long. Even taking the city of Belgorod is not such an easy thing. It's going to take battalions and battalions of soldiers. How long this can last, we really must see. It could take weeks, it could take months. This could be the turnaround for a part of Ukrainians' front line. You will never know. We have to see how well they establish their supply lines and how hard they can dig in to defend their land that they have already conquered. Stay connected to my families on both sides of the conflict, the Ukrainian side and the Russian side, and I'll make sure to provide you guys an insight that the media simply would not tell you. Many Russian citizens, including my grandmother, never had thought that the Ukrainian army would be able to push so far into Russia. It's insane that they retaliated with such a different kind of tactic. Not many people would have expected it, including my grandmother. They would have thought that the front would be held on all sides. The drone attacks, they kept coming in for months before the initial invasion of the Ukrainian Armed Forces on this region. So for a very long time, drones, reconnaissance, and suicide drones have been launching nonstop at this region. They must have had tons of data, tons of information to work with in order to figure out the best route of attack and the best plan in order to cut off Russian supply lines. This just shows you how technology can seriously shift the tide of war in such a quick instant. Nobody expected this. Nobody. Not my grandmother, not even some of the Ukrainians that I know living in Ukraine expected such a push from the Ukrainian army. So like I said, drone reconnaissance is key nowadays. Technology is king on the battlefield. Using the right technology means you control the tide of war. Clearly, the Ukrainians were able to use enough reconnaissance and enough suicide drones to disrupt enough Russian infrastructure and get enough of a good picture of what is going on and what they have to deal with. That is how they did this for months before they striked. That's basically my take on the Russian-Ukraine war. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll definitely keep you updated as more information comes from both of my family sides, from Ukraine and Russia. I'll let you know if anything new or important comes out.